I used to think I understood what loss felt like. I had been through the death of loved ones, broken relationships, failures that left my heart heavy as stone. But none of that compared to that morning. I opened the apartment door at 6 a.m., exhausted after an overnight trip. All I wanted was to lie down to sleep, to return to the place I called home. Everything should have felt familiar. Quiet. Normal. But that morning the apartment was silent in a way that wasn't. Then I saw them. Red rose petals scattered in a trail from the living room all the way to the bedroom door. I hadn't done it. And my husband was never that kind of man. My heart started pounding. Each step felt heavier than the last. I could have turned away. I could have pretended I didn't see anything. But I kept walking. And when the door opened, the world I had trusted for 8 years collapsed in a single moment. The person lying in my bed wasn't just my husband. It was my sister. And that was when I realized. Some kinds of pain don't kill you instantly. They force you to stay alive just to watch everything fall apart. I didn't scream right away. I just stood there, my hand still on the doorknob, as if staying perfectly still might make the scene disappear. But it didn't. They were still there. Too real. Too close. My sister was the first to wake up. Her eyes flicked over me for a brief second, then settled. No panic like I expected, no shame like I hoped. Just a calmness so cold it felt unreal. "You're home early." Her voice was light, like she was making casual conversation. My husband jolted awake, then fumbling, trying to say something, anything, but every word sounded hollow. I didn't need to hear it. I had already seen enough. Then my sister sat up, pulling the blanket over herself carelessly, and placed a hand on her stomach. "I'm pregnant." The words dropped clean and deep like a blade. 3 months. No one cried. No one apologized. Just me standing there, feeling like the air had been drained out of the entire world. And the thing that suffocated me the most wasn't the betrayal. It was the way they said it, as if I was just someone who showed up at the wrong time. I thought that was the lowest point. I was wrong. A week later I was called to a family meeting. They said it was to talk like adults. I was still naive enough to hope for an apology. A little support. Something that resembled fairness. But the moment I walked into that room, I understood. I had no allies. My husband and my sister sat next to each other. Their hands touched like it was second nature. My mother-in-law sat at the head of the table, her gaze cold and certain, as if everything had already been decided. And my parents just sat there in silence. No one asked if I was okay. No one said this was wrong. Instead, they talked about their future, about the baby, about marriage, about how I should step aside quietly, so everything could stay peaceful, as if I were the problem that needed solving. I looked at each face, searching for even a flicker of objection, but all I saw was avoidance and calculation. Have you ever realized you were completely alone in your own family? If you have, then you understand why that moment hurt even more than the betrayal itself. I still didn't understand why my parents stayed silent. Until she spoke. My mother-in-law sat upright, fingers interlaced like she was negotiating a contract, not talking about my life. Her voice was calm, precise, almost kind. "If you didn't listen too closely to the words, we need to look at reality." "What reality?" Then she turned to my parents. And it only took a glance for me to see them avoid my eyes. Last year's hospital bills. The bank loan. The business that was slipping under. Each detail laid out like she was reading a financial report. No emotion, no hesitation. And then I understood. It wasn't that they didn't want to protect me. It was that they couldn't. Or worse, they chose not to. She smiled slightly, a smile that never reached her eyes. "I helped your family when they needed it most." The sentence hung in the air like an invisible wire, tightening around everyone in the room. And I stood there, realizing something that turned my heart to ice. I hadn't just been betrayed in love. I had been traded, like a price that needed to be paid. After that meeting, everything moved fast. So fast I didn't even have time to feel what I was losing. Lawyers. Paperwork. Cold conversations that revolved only around money and assets. No one mentioned love. No one mentioned the 8 years I had spent beside that man, as if it had never existed. He contested everything. The apartment, the savings, even the wedding gifts were put on the scale. I sat across from the man who used to be my husband, speaking through lawyers, and wondered when we had become strangers. I lost my job not long after. They called it restructuring. I knew it wasn't a coincidence. Everything was pulled out of my hands piece by piece. In the end, I kept the apartment and a small amount of money. Not much. Not enough to feel secure. But enough to leave. That night I sat alone on the empty floor surrounded by half-packed boxes. No laughter. No plans for the future. Just one question echoing over and over in my mind. If I stayed, what would I have left besides memories already shattered? I didn't stay to find the answer. I chose to leave. 2 weeks later, I packed everything I had left into the trunk of my car. Not much. A few clothes, my laptop, some work tools, and the things I wasn't brave enough to throw away. The city behind me slowly faded in the rearview mirror. 8 years of my life, reduced to a single drive. I didn't have a clear plan. No one waiting for me ahead. Just one thing I knew for certain. I couldn't keep living in a place where every corner reminded me of what I had lost. I drove for hours, stopping when exhaustion hit, sleeping briefly in unfamiliar parking lots. Not comfortable, not completely safe. And yet, somehow I felt lighter. As if for the first time in a long time, nothing was holding me back anymore. When the welcome sign came into view, I pulled over. I wasn't crying from pain anymore. I was crying from fear, and from hope. Have you ever had to start over from nothing? If you have, then you understand why that moment is both the most terrifying and the only chance to change everything. The first days didn't feel like a new beginning. They felt like survival. The room I rented was so small I could touch both walls if I stretched out my arms. The air conditioner rattled through the night. The kitchen barely had space for a single pot, but it was the only space that was truly mine. No memories. No one else. In the mornings, I worked at a cafe. In the afternoons, I went everywhere with my portfolio, trying to convince strangers to believe in what I could do. At night, I sat in a corner with my old laptop, taking any job that could bring in money. Logos, wedding invitations, anything. Some days instant noodles were all I ate. Some nights I stared at the screen and couldn't even remember what I was doing. I thought I couldn't last much longer. But then something small happened. One client came back, then another. A referral, a small opportunity. Not a dramatic turning point, just tiny pieces. But they started to connect. And for the first time in a long while, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was slowly rebuilding my life. If you're in your darkest phase right now, don't rush to walk away. Because sometimes what changes everything isn't a giant leap. It's a very small step, where you decide not to give up. I didn't realize when the turning point arrived. It wasn't loud. No explosion. No cinematic moment. Just a simple suggestion, almost casual. If you can design, why not try building it too? I wasn't a technical person. At least that's what I had always believed. But with nothing left to lose, I gave it a shot. My first lines of code were terrible. Errors everywhere. Delete. Rewrite. Late nights spent fixing something that broke again 5 minutes later. There were moments I wanted to quit. But this time I didn't. I met someone in a course. We started working on a small project together. At first it was just an experiment. Then it became something more serious. And eventually something neither of us expected. A product. An idea. An opportunity. We pitched it in front of a group of investors. I still remember how my hands trembled standing on that stage. But once I started speaking, everything became strangely clear. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove I was good enough. I was building something that had value. And when they asked if we wanted to turn it into a real company, I already knew my answer. Funny thing about life's biggest doors, they don't swing open with a bang. They open quietly, almost unnoticed. Right at the moment you decide to step through. 5 years passed faster than I expected. Not because time sped up, but because I stopped looking back. That night I stood in a grand hall, lights blazing, surrounded by people I had only ever seen on screens before. My name was displayed on the stage. Our company was the main sponsor. I had built a new life. A life without them. Then I saw that name on the guest list. I thought it would pull me backward. Thought my heart might crack open all over again. But it didn't. When they walked in, I just stood there and looked. He looked more worn down. She was still beautiful, but her eyes no longer held the same light. A child walked between them, holding both their hands, unaware of the story behind it all. They saw me. And I saw the moment recognition flicker across their faces. I could have walked over, could have said something, could have made them feel even a fraction of what I once felt. But I didn't. I turned back to my conversation as if they were just strangers in a crowded room. And in that moment, something settled quietly inside me. The greatest victory isn't when they see your success. It's when you no longer need them to. I never saw them again after that night. I didn't need to. My life moved forward, not loud but steady. I married someone who never made me prove my worth. I built a company from nothing and watched it grow day by day. Not everything is perfect, but for the first time, everything is mine. I used to think the worst thing that happened to me was being betrayed, being replaced, being left behind. But looking back now, I see it differently. The worst thing isn't losing someone. It's losing yourself trying to hold on to someone who was never worth it. And the best thing isn't success or recognition. It's the day you're strong enough to walk away and never look back. If you're in a place where you feel like you're not enough, not important, not loved, remember this. You don't have to fight to be chosen. You can choose to leave. And sometimes that choice is the beginning of everything you truly deserve. If this story made you pause even for a moment, then maybe you already understand what matters most. And maybe you're standing at a choice of your own.